What's up, everybody? So this is one of my favorite motorcycles that's in my collection. It's my BMW R50/5, aka the toaster tank. And they got this signature name because the tank itself represents a toaster. I'm a huge BMW Airhead fan. Obviously, if you didn't know that, I have several Airheads in my collection. This one I've had the longest. I've had this one about 8 years, and it has been the most reliable motorcycle, hands down, that I've ever owned. And why I say it's the most reliable, and especially in the title that I put, the most reliable vintage motorcycle you ever own, is because it truly is. I would say this is, in terms of reliability, at a score of 0 to 10, 10 being the most reliable, 0 being obviously the least reliable, this scores a solid 9.5. Because it is just built like a tank, and what I mean by tank is BMW literally over-engineers every single thing about this. B is it's the ease of working on it. It's incredibly simple, and I'll walk around and show you what I mean by simple. So this bike first came out in 1969, and this one's a 6970 model. It was actually a European version. It spent some time in Canada and then made its way down to the stateside. Well, I obtained this bike from a guy, and it was sitting in the side of his garage, covered up. Didn't get ran for a really long time. I simply cleaned out the carbs and changed the oil, and it fired right up. Now, what I mean by back to the reliability part, I've literally have only done oil changes, spark plug changes, valve adjustments, and that is it in 8 years time of owning this. And I'm going to show you, point out some points of it, what I mean, like it is the most reliable bike. So let's start with the walk around of what it's about and what it is and why I like BMW Airheads versus other bikes. So this is an R50, and aka it stands for the 50, means 500 cc's. And it is a twin cylinder boxer. And what I mean by boxer is that you have two sets of pistons right here, and they go back and forth on a uniform crank. And their signature BMW engine design is the boxer. It has been around since the late 19s, early 20s, 1920s. I don't remember what the very first boxer model came out. I believe it was in 1921. But they've been around for the last 100 years, and they haven't changed a lot. This is air cooled, so meaning that these fins right here trap air and pull heat away from the cylinder heads. There's no oil cooler, there's no water pump, there's no radiator. It's simply air cooled, and it is completely headache free. Has the usual from this era of motorcycle drum brakes front and rear, no discs, and it is carbureted. Now these, sorry, it's a little windy right now. These have the factory Bing carburetors, and it is a float bowl style. There's a float right in there, and is inducted through the airbox on the intake stroke, comes in through the intake and hits the carburetor. Fuel is added at the perfect ratio, and it goes into the cylinder head. And what I love about these bikes is they are so easy to work on. You literally can pop this carburetor off in 2 minutes, make your adjustments. You can pull the valve cover off in 2 minutes, do your valve adjustments. If you need to change a spark plug, if you need to pull off your exhaust manifold, everything is right there. This has a typical vintage motorcycle fuel cutoff valve, as well as switch to reserve, and it's still in German, as well as has the English counterparts. Now, some cool aspects about this bike. It is probably one of my, well, okay, let's put it this way. It is the slowest bike that BMW made in this series. What I mean by slowest is I think it makes an astonishing 36, 37 horsepower. We're at right now probably 8,700 feet. We're at high altitude, and we're doing 60 miles an hour, 55, 60. There's points that you will be working it at higher RPM, but overall, it still handles these mountain roads just fine. So this is the slowest series in this, well, I should say series. This is the lowest horsepower numbered engine in this series. It's a 500 cc 4-stroke boxer. They have the R75, which is a 750, and I think the last variant of it was the R90, which was a 900cc. They even, obviously in the next series, the non-toaster tank had the R100, which was 1000cc. I think even the 75 is a night and day difference between the 500, but I'm perfectly happy with this motorcycle, and I literally ride it everywhere. So it's a very, very comfortable touring bike. I mean, her and I did 100 miles today. She's
like a dream.
Like a dream.
Feels great.
Your butt feels great. Not for long. Anyways, it's just a timeless design. It's an absolute timeless design. It's about a 3.5 gallon, 4 gallon tank. It's very easy to fill up. Little attributes that are amazing about this bike for the year that I think really separate it from the rest is, okay, detail aesthetics. This has electric start and kick start. I'm going to demonstrate how both work. But we're going to start with the key. This is the signature BMW key. I'm not going to pull it out, but you get a rough idea of what it looks like. It goes right in the front right here. You're going to push that down. You get a light indication. And right now it is showing that I'm not neutral. So I'm going to find neutral. Neutral light just came on. You have, what I love about, I feel like the Germans are ahead of their design, is a little design aesthetics. Look at this instrument cluster. I absolutely love it. You have the tachometer down here with the red line of 6,800 RPM, and your speedometer shows 120. I've only done 103 with this bike, and I had a slight downhill. That was fast enough, and the revs were quite high, but it does it. This is, one of these is your oil pressure light, as well as a low voltage or lack of generator power, meaning if your alternator goes out or your battery becomes disconnected, that light will let you know, as well as the oil pressure if it becomes below a certain level. So that's the first design aesthetic I love about this bike. The next one, you're wondering, what is this? That is a factory steering stabilizer, and you can literally turn it and loosen it. If you want to stiffen it up going down the highway, you're at a much higher speed, you can literally stiffen this up. It's the greatest thing ever. This also has, if you look at this dial right here, you can turn this, tighten the throttle for, amazingly, cruise control is what I call it. If I'm cruising down the highway and I'm tired of holding this, I will tighten this up and set my speed based on throttle. It also works really good when it's really cold out and you need a higher RPM to warm up the engine. You have your standard halogen headlight. I put on the European license plate, and as far as it's 2-passenger, you know, it's just an overall great riding motorcycle. Now, this has both electric start and kick start, and I'm going to show you how both work, as well as the sound it has. This bike is completely bone stock, except the exhaust pipes. I put on aftermarket German brand that I found a set from that were from the late 70s, and I put them on here, and it sounds incredible. But overall, this bike is completely bone stock from the factory. And as we get on this side, I'm going to show you something that separates BMWs from other motorcycles and truly makes them a league of their own. And there are pros and cons, but I'm going to show you, in my opinion, a pro when everything works in unison. You'll notice that if you looked on the other side, there's no chain, and there's no chain, but you're going to see a big, what is that? This bike has a drive shaft. Literally from the transmission, power is delivered through a drive shaft to a rear differential. And BMW has been using this design since the 20s. This bike has not changed much since the 20s as far as the overall design aesthetic of power delivery and whatnot. Same with engine design. And I love that about BMW because they have stuck to their name brand design for the last 100 years, except they just keep making it better by little details. So yes, this bike is drive shaft driven. I've owned both chain driven and drive shaft driven, and frankly, I like both. Both have their pros and cons. Chains, I feel that you get a little bit more power. I feel drive shaft will rob a little bit of power, but drive shaft is instantaneous delivery, and they're essentially, if you change the oil out and keep these boots fresh, they're essentially maintenance free. You never have to do anything to them. So that covers that aesthetic. The next one that we're gonna go over is the actual design of this. I find is art. I find this whole bike is simply art. And I think that's what appealed to me most when I saw these. I've always wanted a BMW Moto since I was a kid. Got this metal tin sign that I got when I was like 11 years old, and it had a BMW R60 on it. But this design is like art to me. And if you look at this, it's just like this whole entire thing is an engine. And that is absolutely fascinating me. The pipes come down and they exit through here. It's simply art. And I really appreciate about these is the overall look of this bike. It just looks really good. So enough of me yapping. Another point I'm going to point out about essentially the end scene of this is why I find these bikes so much more reliable than another bike of this era. Well, I'm going to show you something on the instrument cluster if you haven't noticed already. Yeah, that reads exactly as it says. This bike has just under 70,000 miles. Those cylinder heads have never been off this bike. And it has 70,000 miles. You will not find another motorcycle that has remained unsealed and ridden that long and be that reliable. You're just not. You're gonna have some guys gonna post in the comments, just watch this. Oh, my CB 350 made it to 70,000 miles, no problem, what are you talking about? I get that, maybe you got a lucky one. I had a Honda CB and this bike would never make it to 70,000 miles. And to me, 70,000 miles, this bike is just getting broken in. You will never find another motorcycle manufacturer that has more motorcycles with over 100,000 miles and have remained untouched internally than BMW. So that's when I say that they are the most reliable motorcycles I've ever owned. A buddy of mine has an R75 from the late 70s, early 80s, and he's got shy of 166,000 miles on his. He's done valve adjustments, new valve seats. The internals of the engine, regardless of that, are still the original. You're not going to find another bike of this era that has that many miles. And same with any of their new bikes. It's the same case. They're the most reliable tank built, like attention to detail motorcycle ever. My Paris Dakar is the same thing. I'm going to do a video on that bike. So yeah, if I needed to ride this to California tomorrow in current condition, I would do nothing to this except add gas and a little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil, and I would ride this to California tomorrow, which I've actually thought about doing, believe it or not. So, all right, let's do a startup procedure because it's kind of fascinating. I'm gonna do the key is in, down, indication on the light. Kickstart is on the left side, and I'm just gonna go down like this and stock form, these are not that loud, they're much quieter. I put on these aftermarket pipes, but in my opinion, it's a nice touch to this engine. It's hard to explain what type of sound it makes. It kind of sounds part Harley, but then as soon as it starts getting in the revs, it's no longer a Harley, it's a BMW. To shut it off, simply pull up on the key. I'm also going to demonstrate it has factory electric start, which is this guy right here. I'm going to push this. So that's the Beamer. Let's go take it for a little spin. It's probably going to be some wind noise, but you'll get what a first-hand look of riding this through some mountain roads, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, you ready? Come on, my favorite Jew, let's go. Okay. Okay, thank you. So if you're thinking about getting an old BMW motorcycle, I would say yes in every possible way. You're also wondering if there are any cons of an old BMW motorcycle. Well, everything has pros and cons. Pros of this bike is obviously reliability, ease of working on, and simplicity, and just there's nothing like riding a vintage motorcycle, but especially a vintage BMW motorcycle. I've ridden more motorcycles than I can count in my lifetime, and I still come back to an old BMW because they just ride like a vintage motorcycle should feel like and sound like, and everything about it. It's a full immersive experience riding one of these old bikes. So if you are looking at one, I would definitely advise it. Cons, they are heavy. They're not super fast in comparison to other bikes at 500 cc's. That's why I was saying, if you're planning on doing a lot of highway riding or other types of touring, maybe look at an R75 versus a 50. Her and I ride this all over, but it's slow. It's not gonna win any races. It's heavy, it's slow, it doesn't stop that great, but you know, I don't mind it because it's not about how fast you get there, it's about the journey. And this bike is definitely a journey type bike. Price points of these, I got this thing a long time ago for pennies. They're getting harder to find, really a lot more expensive to find as well. I have a 1960 BMW R60 with a sidecar I need to do a video on. That's also like art, but these are art bikes. This isn't something that you should plan to buy and do 100 miles an hour every day, and like, I mean, they'll do it, but that's not the point of this bike. The bike is appreciate attention to detail and riding it. And so like her and I just did a big ride today and we're all smiles. We're not sore. We could do another 100 miles today and you might be sore, but
no, it's like the couch of motorcycles.
You're pretty comfy on the bike.
I'm so comfy.
Yeah, it's a great touring bike. So thank you for watching this episode, and I'm gonna do some more on my other bikes because I have quite a few I need to do episodes on because they're all unique in themselves and they're very cool. So that's all. More rides to come.